Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing a story that you might have actually lived through yourself, and trust me, it's a love story. Are you ready? Let's go! She was 63 years old, standing in her own home, and suddenly she felt something press against her that she had never felt in her entire life. And when she finally understood what it was, this woman, who had designed hundreds of beautiful homes, realized she had never truly felt at home in her own body until that moment. Oh my goodness, girls, you are absolutely not going to believe what I am about to tell you right now. I heard this story from a woman I know, and I have been thinking about it ever since. So pour yourself a glass of wine, get comfortable, and let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret was 63 years old, and she had spent her entire career making other people's homes beautiful. She lived in San Francisco in a gorgeous townhouse in the Pacific Heights neighborhood, all high ceilings and original hardwood floors and windows that looked out over the bay. From the outside, her life looked like a magazine cover, a successful interior design business she had built from nothing over 35 years. A reputation that meant clients flew her out to New York and Chicago and Miami just to tell them what color to paint their walls. A home that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. But inside those beautiful walls, Margaret was deeply, quietly, completely alone. Her husband, Robert, had left her 4 years earlier. Not for another woman, not for anything dramatic. He had simply looked at her one evening over dinner and said that he felt like they had become strangers. And the terrifying thing, the thing that kept Margaret awake at night long after the divorce was finalized, was that she could not argue with him. They had become strangers. Somewhere between building her business and raising their 2 daughters and getting through the ordinary, exhausting business of life, they had simply stopped seeing each other. And then he was gone. After the divorce, Margaret threw herself back into work the way she always had. She took on more clients, longer projects, more complicated renovations. She redesigned a historic mansion in Nob Hill. She flew to Austin for 3 weeks to oversee a complete gut renovation of a tech executive's home. She kept herself so busy that there was never any space for the loneliness to fully land. But it was always there, waiting for her at the end of every long day, sitting in that beautiful townhouse of hers, completely silent. Then one morning in October, Margaret noticed a crack running along the entire length of her living room ceiling. A structural issue, her contractor friend told her. Not dangerous, but not something to ignore either. She needed someone to come in and assess the damage and figure out what needed to be done. Her usual contractor was out of town for 6 weeks, so she called the company her friend had recommended, a small crew based out of the Mission District that had a reputation for doing exceptional work. The next morning at 8 o'clock sharp, there was a knock at her door. When Margaret opened it, she found a young man standing on her front steps. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and the kind of calm, steady eyes that made you feel like whatever the problem was, it was going to be handled. He was wearing a grey work shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and he was holding a clipboard and looking up at the facade of her building with the focused professional expression of someone who genuinely loved what he did. His name was Daniel. He was 28 years old. And from the very first moment he walked into her home, Margaret noticed something about him that she could not quite name. He was extraordinarily good at his job. That was the first thing. He moved through her townhouse with a quiet confidence, running his hands along the walls, pressing his ear to the plaster in places, making notes on his clipboard, asking Margaret clear practical questions about the history of the building and when she had first noticed the crack and whether she had seen any water damage anywhere else. He spoke to her like an equal, and never talked down to her, never made her feel like she did not understand her own home. And when she asked him questions, he answered them fully and honestly, even when the honest answer was not what she wanted to hear. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel and his small crew came to Margaret's home every weekday morning. The work was more extensive than originally assessed. The crack in the ceiling was connected to a larger issue with one of the supporting beams, and fixing it properly meant opening up a section of the wall in the living room and replacing a portion of the original structure. Margaret had renovated enough homes to know that this kind of work, done right, was slow and careful and expensive. She trusted Daniel from the beginning, and as the weeks went on, she found herself looking forward to his arrival every morning in a way that surprised and confused her. They started talking, really talking. During the lunch break, when his crew went out and Margaret was working from home, she would bring 2 cups of coffee to the living room and they would sit among the drop cloths and the sawdust and just talk. About the building at first, about the history of Victorian architecture in San Francisco, about the neighborhoods that were changing and the ones that were holding on. But then about other things, about her work, her clients, the strange intimate experience of walking into someone's home and understanding immediately what they needed even when they could not articulate it themselves. About his work, the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it sound again. The way a building told you its own story if you knew how to listen. Margaret noticed that Daniel never talked about his personal life. He was warm and funny and genuinely curious about everything she said. But whenever the conversation turned toward relationships or family or what he did on weekends, something subtle shifted in him. Not cold, not unfriendly, just careful. Like a door that was very gently, very firmly closed. She did not push. She knew what it felt like to have things you were not ready to talk about. Then, one afternoon in the 3rd week, something happened that Margaret said she still thinks about every single day. She had been trying to reach a paint sample that had slid to the back of a high shelf in her storage room. She was standing on her tiptoes, arms stretched all the way up, when Daniel came in behind her to let her know his crew was leaving for the day. The storage room was narrow, barely enough space for 2 people, and Daniel stepped in close to reach the shelf above her head. And in that small crowded space, Margaret felt something press against her that stopped every thought in her mind completely. She did not move. She did not speak. Her whole body went absolutely still. Daniel stepped back immediately and apologized, his voice low and genuinely flustered in a way she had never heard from him before. Margaret turned around and saw something on his face that she had not seen there before either. Not just embarrassment, something deeper, something that looked almost like grief. That evening, after his crew had gone, Daniel stayed behind. He sat at her kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, and he told her something that he said he had never told anyone in his professional life. He told her that he had something that had made his personal life extraordinarily difficult, that the women he had been with had not been able to handle it, that he had learned, after years of painful experiences, to simply not talk about it, not bring anyone close enough to find out, to keep that part of himself locked away because the alternative was watching someone look at him like he was something frightening. He had been alone for 3 years. He had gotten used to it. He had told himself he was fine with it. And Margaret sat across from him and listened to every single word. And then she said something that made him look up at her with an expression she said she will never forget for the rest of her life. She said that she understood what it felt like to be in a beautiful space that nobody ever truly entered. She said she had spent 35 years making homes for other people and had somehow forgotten to make one for herself. She said that she did not think anything about him was frightening. She thought he was one of the most decent human beings she had met in years. And she was 63 years old, and she had learned the hard way that decent human beings were worth more than any other thing in the world. Daniel looked at her for a long time without saying anything, and then very quietly, he said, "Thank you." Over the following weeks, and something between them shifted slowly and carefully and completely. They started having dinner together after his crew left. They walked through her neighborhood in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. He met her daughters, who were suspicious at first, and then, gradually, unable to deny that their mother was more alive than she had been in years. She met his mother, a warm, fierce woman from Sacramento who took one look at Margaret and told her son that he had better not be foolish about this. The renovation finished in December, and Daniel did not stop coming to the townhouse. Girls, I think about Margaret's story all the time. I think about what it means to be 63 years old and still capable of being surprised by life. I think about what it takes to sit across from another person and actually listen to them, though really listen, without flinching and without running. Margaret did not go looking for any of this. She went looking for someone to fix a crack in her ceiling. What she found was someone who needed exactly the kind of steadiness and warmth and genuine attention that she had spent a lifetime learning how to give. And what she found in return was something she had stopped believing was still available to her. The feeling of being truly seen. Not the version of herself that showed up in design magazines, not the competent professional or the devoted mother or the woman with the beautiful home. just Margaret, all 63 years of her exactly as she was. Sometimes the most important renovations, girls, are not the ones that happen to the walls,